So why is it important for you as an employee to understand the information on your paycheck? Can anybody think of a reason why it would be good for you to know that in terms of what's on your paycheck? Instead of just like, I mean, it's not a bad idea to trust your employer that they're doing things, the way they should, but like, what would be a reason to know why your paycheck is the way it is? Any thoughts on that? Yeah. Because mistakes happen when it comes to payments. Like, yes, software is used to calculate that kind of stuff, but when it comes down to it, a person is on the other side of that software entering information into it. Sometimes things are not entered correctly, whether that's a paycheck or a bill or something like that. When my wife and I first moved to the Dalles and we bought our house, we signed up with the water company to, have our water payments processed every month. And the first couple of months, the water bills that we got were like super high. And I was like, there's no way we're using that much water. I wasn't just looking at the bills and saying, oh, that's how much it costs, I'm gonna go ahead and pay it. I looked at the bills and I was like, wait, there's like overage charges for like going over on the amount of water we have. And it's like, there's no way we're using that much water. Turns out that the person who ended up processing our initial like paperwork to sign up for the water company here, put a wrong number in when they were, setting up our account, and it ended up causing the bill to be a lot higher than it needed to be. So they had to go in and change that and all that kind of stuff. But whether it's a bill, whether it's your paycheck, it's a good idea to, first of all, know how much you make per hour, and then be able to check that to make sure it's accurate. So here's another example of why it would be important. So like if you're working at a place and you've ever gotten a raise, that means that somebody needs to go into that software and change the amount of money that you make per hour in that software to make it reflect the amount of money you're now making, which should be more than it was. So it says that Vince Banna works for a custom furniture shop. He did not pay much attention to the information on his paychecks until he realized that the raise he had been given was not being calculated correctly. So he contacted the payroll clerk who corrected the error. So sometimes that happens. Sometimes some kind of change will happen to the amount of money you make per hour. Could be a raise. Well, could be a raise. It probably would be a raise. And then you just got to double check to make sure that's all correct. So straight time pay is a job, this type of job that you get where you get paid by the hour, basically. So fixed amount of money, hourly rate. A lot of people get hourly rate. Does anybody ever had a job where they don't get paid by the hour? Anybody here ever had a job where you don't get paid per hour? Yeah, Kate, what was it? Yeah. So oftentimes, like if you have a job that you're, doing like summer job, working for like an orchard or something like that, hourly rate isn't really a thing. You probably get paid per bucket, right? Or is it like by weight? By bucket, yeah. And you get a certain amount of money for every bucket that you fill of whatever it is that you're working on in an orchard or something like that around here. So there are different ways that you can get paid. Hourly pay is probably the most common one. Myself, teachers, we get paid on what's called a salary. So basically they tell us the entire amount of money that we're going to earn for the whole year, and then they break that down by month. But with hourly rate, most jobs, especially when you're starting off, like getting a job in high school, you end up with an hourly rate. For example, you might receive $7.50 an hour at the local cinema and sell tickets and work at a concession stand. The $7.50 is the hourly rate the cinema pays you. You know that. Manager has scheduled you to work 15 hours a week. So in calculating it, like this is the math we're going to be doing today. It's just multiplication. You're going to use the number of hours worked to calculate the straight time pay or the total amount of pay you earn for the pay period at a regular hourly rate. So really all we're doing today is you're taking the amount of hours that you work and you're multiplying it by your hourly rate to get the amount of straight time pay. That's it. I'm sure you've actually probably done that before. So like I said, not a challenging lesson today. So some of them will be more challenging than others. This is not one of them. So the total amount of money that you get paid before taxes is what's known as your gross income. Has anybody heard that term before? Gross income? You got like gross income and you have net income. Gross income is just like the total amount of the money that you make before all the like taxes and things are taken out. Gross income, gross pay, gross amount. Gross just means the total before taxes. Consists of the total amount of money you earn no matter how your pay was calculated. So it's not how much money you actually get in your paycheck that you take home. It's just the amount before that stuff is calculated. So flipping on over, turn the page. Get your calculators ready. And we'll work on this first one here. So Sean Nguyen is a male clerk at an advertising firm. She earns $12 an hour. This week, she worked 39.5 hours. What is her straight time pay for the week? So hourly rate, 12 bucks. So we're going to say 12. We're going to multiply that by the hours worked. What's another way of writing 39.5? What is it? 39.5, yeah. So 39.5. So how much did she make that week? What was the total amount? 474 bucks. Cool. Easy. No, go do the next two. Same idea. Like it literally is that simple. So by the way, these numbers here are pretty old. What is the minimum wage in Oregon these days? 14? 14.20. Okay. So like this is definitely from before that. Gosh, I think I need to look that up because my first job, I'm gonna look that up real quick. Because it was not very much per hour. Let's see, that would have been, what summer was that? I think it was the summer of 2001. So let's see. Yeah. So my first job, I earned $6.50 an hour. So minimum wage in Oregon in 2001. So that was what, 23 years ago when I had my first job. Yeah, $6.50 an hour. I think this book, these problems are from like 2010. So the minimum, this has got to be minimum wage, $7.90. That's not very much. So let's go ahead and answer these real quick. What's the answer for number one? 304. Good. So 304 bucks. And this one here? And 30 cents. Yeah, $292.30. 0.3, which would be 30 cents. The only thing you need to make sure of about these problems is use a dollar sign, answer in dollars and in cents. And so if it's 292.3, make sure you put a zero after that for 30 cents. Like we're answering everything here in dollars and cents. My first job ever. So I grew up in Salem, and my dad worked as an airplane mechanic at the airport in Salem. And he worked for a guy who like was pretty wealthy, owned his own business and like owned his own airplanes. And my dad was like the mechanic for those airplanes. And the guy owned a patent for a type of, you guys know washers, like little metal washers that like hold things in place when you screw something in. They're like little metal discs. Okay. Has anybody ever seen the ones that have rubber on them? They have like rubber attached to the metal.
Sorry for the interruption again. It is now time to release the track team. Track team members, please go to the attendance office and sign out before you leave.
Okay. So, some washers have like rubber on them and it makes them seal a little bit better. So the guy that my dad worked for invented or patented, maybe not invented, but he patented that. So like he owned the rights to put rubber on washers, which you don't really think about too much, but then when you think about how many washers get made and once it's rubber, like he had a lot of money. So I ended up working for that manufacturing plant where they made the washers. And it was the worst job I've ever had. I was 16 years old and it was a summer job and I had to stand at a table for 8 hours a day and I sorted washers. Like took them from a big bucket, scooped them out, put them on the table, laid them out, and like sorted through and picked out the bad ones for 8 hours a day. It was the most boring, mind-numbing, just terrible, terrible job. They wouldn't let us sit, by the way. They had to stand. You know why? You know why they wouldn't let us sit down to do that job? Any guesses? What happens if you get really bored sometimes? Sometimes you fall asleep when you get really bored. People who had done that job before, they used to let them sit down, and they would end up falling asleep because it was so dull and boring. We just stood at a table. So they made people stand. So we stood at it like, it was just me and this other kid, stood at a table across from each other and just dumped out cans of washers and sorted them. It was awful. It was actually really good motivation for me to continue to do well in school. Because I was like, you didn't need any kind of education or degree to do that kind of job. And I was like, shoot, I want to be able to do a lot more than this for a career. So it was definitely good motivation to like go to college and, you know, do more than like that. It was awful. Anyway, so those are our two answers there. So we only have like a couple more examples here. These ones are going to use a little bit of algebra, which with algebra here, it's going to be like one, maybe two steps. So it says that Ralph Masalis is an accounting clerk. He earns $14.40 an hour. How many hours per week does he need to work? How many must he work if he wants to earn approximately $550 a week? So we're going to figure out the straight time pay, which the straight time pay here would be 550. And then we're going to plug that into the left side of the equation. We're going to say, let H represent the hours. And then, so that's going to be number of hours worked. And then the hourly rate we know is 1440. So our equation then, we're just going to write in the straight time pay, how much he wants to earn here, 550. And you don't have to use the decimals when you're writing the equation, but we'll go ahead and if we need to use decimals in our answer, we will, is equal to, what's our hourly rate? Yeah, 1440, or if you just want to write 14.4, that's fine for this one. You can put the 0 if you want to, you don't have to. And then we're using H for the number of hours worked, so times H. And so we have to solve for H. How many hours does Ralph need to work in order to earn $550 at $14.40 an hour? So how do we get H by itself? This is a one-step algebra problem. Divide by what? Yeah, just divide by 14.4 on both sides. There we go. So work that out on your calculator. 550 divided by 14.4. How many hours? Round it to the nearest 10. What does that end up rounding to? You go to the nearest single decimal place, 10. What do we get? Okay. 38 point. So the number after the one rounds. So if we go to the nearest 10th, we're rounding to the nearest number here. So we look at the number afterwards. If that's 5 or more, that rounds this one up by 1. So we're going to get 38.2. So our answer then, not me, he needs to work 38.2 hours per week. That'll be our answer to that one. So one step algebra problem. It didn't tell us to round it, but when you're talking about like decimals with hours, one decimal place is usually enough when we're talking about an hour. So about 38.2 hours in order to make that $550 a week. Which 38.2, that's basically full time. It's like less than 2 hours away from working full time. So essentially full time on that. All right, let's go ahead and turn it over. And I want you to answer those last two on your own. And then once we're done with that, I'll get you your assignment. So really short lesson today. Some of the lessons will definitely be more challenging than this, but we're starting off pretty simple. So let's take 2 or 3 minutes on that. Questions 3 and 4, by the way, are just like the one that we just did. So set them up very similarly and then solve them. And then we'll take a look at the answers and I'll get you your assignment. A lot of work time today. All right, Alexis, what you got for number 3?
23 hours, 22 hours.
Yeah. We got our pay is equal to the rate times the hours. You don't have to write this out if you don't want to write this out. If you know what to plug in, just plug it in. So we're gonna get 522 equals 22.5 H. By the way, on an assignment, the things that I would expect to see are at least an equation and an answer. You don't necessarily need to show a lot of work, but just a little bit of work is enough. And then an answer, obviously. So 23.2 hours per week, that's a good way to write your answer. If you just want to write 23.2 hours, that's fine as well. But if there's a situation, if it's a word problem and you're solving for a variable, don't just leave it with the variable as your answer. The reason for that is, like, if you think about conversation, I always say, like, if you're answering a word problem, it sounds weird if you were talking to somebody, if you're answering that in a conversation. If somebody's like, hey, how many hours a week do I need to work to earn this much money? And you respond and you say H equals 23.2. That's going to seem weird to that person because you're like, that's not how people talk, right? You'd say, no, you need to work 23.2 hours. Otherwise, you kind of sound like a robot, right? And, you know, sometimes math people get kind of pegged into that like robotic sort of personality type, which I can relate to that, but I still know how to have a conversation. So write the answer like you would if you were talking to somebody. Number 4, Annalie, you got number 4? There you go. 22.8 hours per week on that one. Nice. So $190 a week is how much she wants to earn. Her rate is $8.35 an hour. So there's our equation. 190 equals 8.35 H divided by 8.35, and get about 22.8 when you round it. 3 did not need to be rounded. 4 did need to be rounded. That's it. That's all I got for you for this lesson. Pretty quick. So we can definitely expect, like, for the rest of this week, it's not going to get any more complicated than this. We'll do another lesson tomorrow, but like,